haven't broadcast yet. Let's get ready. All right, people are filing in. I'm gonna wait for my spiel. How are you guys doing?
Doing great.
Yes, yeah, my human friends here on the screen. I'll introduce you here in a second, but oh man, you guys are. It's like I like to say that it's like popcorn. I just wait until it slows down a little bit, and then I know I open the door. All right, I'll go ahead and get going. Thank you. Welcome to the second session of the second annual Ambition Customer Summit. You see my friend and colleague Mark McWatters here in his purple year one Ambition Customer Summit OG shirt. Man, those are pretty. And we are so excited to be here. We really wish it could be in person, and it will be again, but we could not let the Rona keep us down this year. So we're doing it again. And then also joining me is Mary Foster. She's going to be manning our chat today. So please, as we go through today, we'll ask questions and I'll do a little bit of housekeeping here in a second. But welcome to Big Teams, Happy Reps, Keeping Employees Engaged with Gamification. It's in the title. We're going to talk about gamification here. We're going to show you some customer examples. And just pick Mark's brain on just tactics that we ourselves are employing that we think are effective. So housekeeping though, I'm recording this. We will record everything. If you're watching me right now, you will 100% get this recording. You'll get all four for the whole day. So woohoo. But you are muted. So please type into the chat. Fun fact about chat is that I think by default, it just sends stuff to the panelists. So if you are saying something that you're like, I want everyone in here to see my funny thing that I'm saying, make sure that you select panelists and attendees. You have to manually do it. It's annoying. Otherwise, you can just privately send stuff to the panel and Mary will scoop that up and lay it on us as we go. Also, very fun thing, and it's popping off over there. I was pretty impressed. I didn't know how this would go, frankly. But you can head to our Slack channel. The link is in the chat. For some reason, you don't see that. Mary can pop it back in there. You're like Spinderella on this webinar. I'm loving it. But CS 2020 gamification is where we'll talk about this session. And then stay tuned after this session. That's where we'll also be doing the Q&A because I'll have to hop off this one into our next session about coaching. So if you do want to chat and ask really specific questions with Mark and the rest of the attendees, head over that way. So fun stuff. Well, I'm super pumped. Like I said, I am here with Mark McWatters. He is the VP of Sales here at Ambition. Say hello.
What's up, everybody? Ambition customer fam. I was just scrolling through some of the names there, see a lot of people I know. So thank you all so much for being here and looking forward to talking a little gamification.
Absolutely. Well, before we hop in, I do have a couple stats. You know me, I like a stat. So we, just to frame this conversation a little bit, we did a survey earlier this year, and as customers, non-customers, over 75% of the teams that we surveyed said they were doing gamification contests of some sort. We were like, awesome, that is great. It's also the main reason that a lot of you probably purchased Ambition to begin with. It's the number one reason on the marketing side, which is where Mary and I sit in the house, the people are finding us online at the moment. So really bodes well, really pumped to hear it. But only 18% of managers said that they felt confident they were actually, in that same survey, tracking the right KPIs, because we believe, obviously, a gamification and coaching program has to be data-driven, has to really be the thing that pushes you forward. If you don't know if you're tracking the right KPIs, that tells us that you may have some trouble running the right kind of competitions or the right kind of contests to get to the place that you need to be. So just a couple of framing stats there. So I'm going to go ahead and stop my screen share and kick it over to you, Mark, for the first question. And like I said, type things into the chat if you have questions for Mark. But first question for you is, why do you think that is? Why do you think high-level managers are struggling with knowing if they're tracking the right stuff and running the types of competitions that actually would get people where they need to be with the right KPIs? Talk us through that.
The first miss there is many sales managers don't know their sales formula. And what I mean by sales formula is what inputs equal what outputs. Now, sometimes a sales manager will be like, I don't totally know what that is. That's okay. Do you roughly know what that is? Most of the time, you understand what activities are going to lead to what outcomes. Okay. So if you don't, if you're still like Mark, I really don't know, you need to start tracking these things and you need to start A/B testing them inside of Ambition. The good news is you have a tool that can help you do that. If you don't know what right looks like yet, get with your CSM. We can help you get there. The second part, though, is once you have that foundation of the right metrics, you have that scorecard in place of activities and objectives, the baseline of success, then you layer on the gamification, which only is designed to move the metrics most important to your business. So why do a lot of people fail? They're running spiffs on metrics that aren't important. How do you know if they're not important? Most of the time, the rep will tell you, hey, why are we doing a competition around that? Like, I don't think that actually moves the needle. Are they right? They may be wrong. The second part is that you look at gamification as a shot in the arm, as opposed to a real culture shift. We even still have some clients who think about gamification as like, just how do I run the next competition? Gamification is more than a competition. It's visibility where Mark can see how he's performing against Mark yesterday, but also how he can see he's performing against Jamie, Mary, or Mark's team versus Mary's team. There's all kind of power built into the philosophy of this healthy competition that we're driving. A customer the other day coined this as it's like Peloton for their sales team. And my eyes lit up and I'm like, can we put that across the front of the website? Like, that is so good.
We might get sued, but
Yeah.
we're looking into it.
I'm just a sales guy. I don't know how that works. But what I will say, back to making gamification work right, there are a few different types of competitions to be run if you're going to run a competition. You can have the shot in the arm spiff. Those are valuable. You should run those regularly. They should be short and really focused. But what most people miss is the idea of running a longer term competition around multiple metrics in that formula. So in 2015, which feels like 1,000 years ago, the Harvard Business Review wrote this exact article about ambition, customers. If you haven't read this, it's still super applicable today. Sales director took his top 4 KPIs and made his activity score in the scorecard you're all familiar with. Ran a quarter-long fantasy-style competition, so head-to-head, team-based, around activity score. By driving activity score, he drove his top 4 leading indicators in the sales process and had amazing results. His calls that went to an appointment doubled. His outbound meeting set went up 22%. His referrals went up 200%. So think about those metrics in your formula. Run your spiffs for sure. But think about the long-term competition as the way that you really change behavior on whether it be your sales or customer success or renewal, whatever team inside of Ambition. If you can get that formula right, these longer-term competitions can move the needle.
I love it. And we'll actually find, I love that HBR article. So we'll dig that up and send it your way. So moving on though, so you talked a lot about, running those team to team kind of competitions or those head to head competitions. Something though that we are starting to talk about more, I know, and that you've very beautifully outlined in some other, we do a lot of webinars, Mark and I. So I don't know, it was
We're
like
webinar friends.
4 webinars ago. One thing that you, I think, have spoken to really well is the power of kind of that peer-to-peer relationship. And I think often people don't really think about how they could use gamification to facilitate some of that. I think they're probably, like you've mentioned, they're going and they're putting a responsibility on their top performer to like mentor people on the team, which feels then like just another thing that they have to do on their plate.
Yeah.
So can you kind of walk me through, we know that's powerful, but walk me through like some really good examples of using gamification to foster that that peer-to-peer kind of coaching and learning. Cause I think it's really neat.
Yep.
Cause you've done it too.
For sure. So most leaders have been individual contributors before. When I think about when I was an individual contributor, I worked for some great bosses. I was mostly interested though in what the person who was outperforming me was doing. And so, an important thing for any leader is to acknowledge that you don't have all the answers and your team might have better answers than you do, right? So, how do you take your top performers and make them care about the middle performers or the underperformers? Well, that's a whole webinar in itself. But the way you use gamification to do that is you create team-based competitions where if Jamie's the A player and Mark's the D player, now we're on the same team and Jamie knows that my performance is going to affect her outcomes. So now Jamie is interested in, hey, Mark, you're making way too many dials to the wrong people. Like, let me help ensure that you're reaching out to the right contact. Here's how you use your list differently. Here are the times to call as an example. Here's the script that I use that is working more often than your script is, right? So when you create a team-based competition, you have the A players with the D players. Now, for certain cultures, my favorite is when you let the A players draft. I realize not every culture can get away with that. But if you create a draft style format in Ambition, you can create a custom team. And now all of a sudden, you got the A, B, C, and D players on custom teams, and they're really bought into owning their team. What you've also done is you've made the A players captains, and those captains are now, their pride is on the line to make sure their team delivers. So think about how you can empower your top performers to help. Gamification can be a way to do that through team-based style competitions. And so if you haven't tried that, give it a try. I would tell you, make that competition again longer. What do I mean by longer? Probably more than 2 weeks, like a month-long competition to really foster that team environment. And the only other thing I'll add here, okay, this is the headboard to my bed. Most of your sales team is doing stuff like me where they're in the corner of their bedroom, right? So how do you create collaboration, community amongst your sales team? This is also a way to do that. When you put them in a competition together, they're talking more often. They're talking about what's working, not working. They care about each other's performance. And all of a sudden, Mark doesn't feel as lonely in the corner of his bedroom, making his outbound dials. So you didn't think you'd see my headboard today, but you're getting all
Well,
kinds of bonus.
I was staring at it and I was like, what part of Mark's house is here? It kind of looks like a cool, like Spanish, I don't know.
I'm
Like a
not cool
door.
or Spanish, but I'll take it.
It's a cool motif. So I love all of that. That is, we do it here often. And, we do talk a lot about kind of moving the middle or how do you give some of the mojo that's happening at the top to the people that are maybe, how do you pull them up basically? How do you foster that relationship on the team? So outside of pride, outside of camaraderie and work from home, Travis touched on Accolades in the last session.
Yes.
Kind of walk me through a little bit how Accolades fit into this model of kind of this team-based competition, because it's really obvious how to use them, I think, from a manager to a rep, but kind of walk me through that because I think you've got some great insights there.
Yeah, when I'm talking to a customer and I realize they don't use Accolades yet just because it's new or for whatever reason, a light bulb is going off on my head, and that there's such a quick, easy win here. Every department knows what really good performance is. So if nothing else, an accolade can be a way to reward, as Ambition customers hopefully know, automatically through metric attainment, or something that a manager or leader can use to designate that, hey, I'll pick on Mary here, but Mary worked really hard. She's new. She's doing all the right things. We're really encouraged by how she's going to do long term. But boy, she kind of had a tough month. Like, we could use Accolades as a way to acknowledge formally that, hey, we really appreciate what you're doing. Here's your new hire grit award or something. So Accolades can be really powerful. The other part of one of the guys on our sales team coined this, and I love this. Think about Accolades like it's your trophy wall. Those accolades are going to live with the individual, regardless of if they get promoted or take a different role. They're going to live on the profile page there. And so we at Ambition have accolades. For example, classic sales ones: biggest deal, longest deal, competitor steal. For sales development, we have thresholds for numbers of opportunities created. An SDR at Ambition just created his 100th qualified opportunity last week, and he got an accolade on his profile. So think about, these are free rewards, it's recognition, and it's something for the employee to be able to look back and say, yeah, I accomplished that. Like, wow, I had a huge October, or I had a huge 2019. The other thing I'll add here is just company record books. For sales orgs, this means a ton. And again, VP of sales on this, it costs you nothing to put this on their profile. It's kind of like the old days, we'd get like a plaque. Well, here's your digital plaque that's going to live on the Ambition page. The last thing I wanted to add is that you can set these up essentially like a threshold. And I meant to mention this in competitions too. When you're running a competition, similarly to an accolade, you want to reward great performance, whether they're number one or not. Because if you set a threshold, let's say top person to deals closed in November. Well, you could set a threshold within that even if you don't win, but you hit this threshold, we're still going to reward you. You can do the same thing via accolades, right? Because as long as you set the benchmark of how you earn the accolade, then you can have multiple people achieve that accolade. And that's how you get the middle 70% caring about your competition or your accolade versus Jamie, who wins every competition, who doesn't even need the competition to really drive her performance, right? So think about thresholds, think about accolades as a way to recognize that middle 70 to reach higher.
When I was going to say too, you know, one big thing that we saw and was a remark made on the previous session, I was going to say webinar, this is a session, was, you know, a huge thing that happened for a lot of companies this year were things like hiring freezes and budget freezes. And these accolades, I think, are just such a great, very cost effective, you touched on that, but just a cost effective way too, to make people feel special and pumped up without having to quote you from another webinar, like not send out gift cards that are quote unquote grandma incentives or just send to people like the Starbucks gift card. Those things are not all bad, but they don't hold as much meaning as like, wow, I'm the
Can I rip on that for just 2 seconds? So if you're giving out gift cards, and you probably are, a week later, your team forgot you gave them that gift card. Take that gift card and make it an Ambition accolade. It'll live there forever. And it's an easy way for them to be recognized. Maybe you still give them a gift card at some point, but I would encourage you to think about the accolade as more of that long-term recognition for what an employee has done. The last part I'll say on that is sharing it socially. Boy, if you have a sales environment or service environment, whatever it is, where a frontline user is willing to put their accomplishment on LinkedIn, how amazing is that PR for your company?
Yes.
They're promoting an achievement and that you have sent them this achievement. It doesn't cost you $1, but now it's public and creating that atmosphere of, boy, Auto in general. I see Damien on here. Damien, can't wait for you to be in Nashville next time. But Auto in general has such a great culture that they recognize us publicly, and we are sharing it and others are seeing it. I want to work at Auto in general. So love the accolade.
That's a great point. Gosh, there's a lot of activity. Yeah, Mary, what's happening?
I'm going to interrupt because people are really excited about accolades, and it's resonating a lot. We have people creating them for opportunities being hit. But one point that Ashley brought up that I thought was really smart and just like a good observation was like, hey, we used to run Psycho Dialer if you went above and beyond the KPI, but it was tough to keep people incentivized. There's kind of like some burnout around it. Maybe you're a 10-time winner of Psycho Dialer. So how do you kind of combat like the fatigue around something like that? I think part of it is, like Mark said, now the new social sharing component. I think there's more visibility outside your org and like a resume builder. But could you guys talk a little bit about that, about how to keep people motivated or incentivized?
I've got a quick thought here of one, the Psycho Dialer award always makes me laugh. But two, if it's getting stale, you got to switch it up. So like retire the psycho dialer, because if Jamie's won it 10 times in a row, she probably doesn't even care anymore. So let's retire that. What I would do is incent on most improved, but do it over a longer term period of time. So you can't just have like one great day. Run a most improved leaderboard in Ambition, which you can all do, and use that as an accolade achievement for most improved in November, as an example. Jamie, did you have a thought too?
Well, I did. I was going to say, guys, this plays really nicely into what I was just naturally going to ask you next, which is, I think there's something to the accolade getting stale. There's also something to running these one note kind of competitions where or these contests where you're only tracking one KPI, or you're only looking at net new things coming in. And you just touched on it a little bit with most improved metrics and things like that. But can you dig in a little bit deeper to, how can we make our gamification programs more dynamic and make sure that they're touching every part of the employee life cycle, the customer life cycle, that they're not just getting meetings set, but that they're actually, maybe they're tied to other initiatives in the business? Like, what are some of those things to track, and how do we make those more dynamic and represent those in a multifaceted program?
So inside of any number of features within Ambition, but I think on the competition, where my mind is right now, these multi-metric competitions where you can assign weights, just like you can your scorecard, but you assign these points in your competition. So for example, a lot of sales development teams use an Ambition. So maybe you get a point for a call, you get 5 points for a meeting set, you get 10 points for a meeting that holds, and you get 20 for a qualified opportunity. And you also get 1 point for every dollar associated with that opportunity. So what you're doing is putting the emphasis on the most important outcomes that you're driving, but you're still rewarding the activities that are going to lead ultimately to that outcome. So when you think about your customer journey or your sales process in terms of what important steps need to take place, how can we get those inside of Ambition? And now those are metrics in your scorecard, in a goal, in a competition, create an accolade. One thing I saw Adam at Jobber just mentioned in here that I love is the use of Slack triggers through a public sales channel. When you think about that sales formula, there are those early funnel KPIs that just aren't sexy. They're not fun. They're harder. So how do you create the motivation recognition around those? You guys heard in the last session about the Teams integration coming. Well, if you got Slack right now, spin up the Slack integration. Here at Ambition, we live on it. Our Ambition recognition channel is celebrating. We have a dial threshold that it celebrates. We have meeting set threshold. The GIFs are playing. We got a team up in Buffalo. I'm here in Nashville. There's like Buffalo Bills GIFs going off, and I'm playing Titans GIFs. So have some fun with the Slack triggers. The other thing I wanted to add in there is the beauty of the Slack trigger too is it touches everybody. It doesn't have to be an Ambition user. So you push that in there, your CEO may not be an Ambition user, but now they're seeing that salesperson Susie booked a qualified appointment with Adobe, and the CEO now has visibility into that, which is huge. Last thing while I'm running on Slack triggers, Jamie, I know I'm taking this, but I'm excited. What can I say? Is if you haven't used our shortcuts in Slack yet, do that too. So that's just a /Ambition leaderboard. It'll pop a leaderboard into whatever channel. You get to pick the metric based on what's associated. And boom, you have a leaderboard live inside of your Slack. So a lot of cultures are living in Slack these days. That's why our integration exists. If you don't have it, spin it up. It'll help bring even more positivity and accountability, frankly, to the culture.
That was so fun. I will never get mad about you going off about Slack triggers, because it was great, because I got to peep into the chat, and yeah, Adam was saying, it's really cool. The CRO gets to come by and give somebody a high five. And Mary and I can attest, not only does it kind of give you that culture component and that like, yeah, everybody's invested, but we just finished a quarter, and we had goals that are pipeline goals that are tied to, what sales is doing. So, I mean, we were glued to that recognition channel as we got closer and closer to those shared pipeline goals, because it's like, you know, you truly are at that point celebrating every win, not just because it feels nice, but because, you know, this is how we can all stay accountable and like just have visibility into what's happening. So it's very, very cool. I had to take it out of the fun realm. I'm like, it was neat to see her, see if we were going to hit our goals.
I was going to say that too. I'm repping Team
Yeah.
Pipeline today, which
Yeah.
is for us, it's our outbound and inbound efforts together. And not only was it super fun to keep people focused on the goal, every time something would convert to an opportunity, we were using, you know, we use our own products. So Ambition was firing to Slack. We were refreshing the totals. We were looking to see if we were on pace. Everyone was commenting. And it takes something really hard, like hitting a big revenue goal in the middle of a pandemic, and makes you kind of forget about that. Makes it fun, makes it feel attainable.
Yeah.
And so, yes, to like everyone's point, it's fun, but it's also super helpful for us to actually see, hey, where we are, what do we need, what deals are outstanding, what's coming in. It's cool.
What's that horrible analogy? Like, how do you eat a whale or something? It's like one little bite at a time. You know, you can't just. You're not just gonna
I don't know if that's the analogy, but I like your version.
Is that something like that? Eat a whale, eat an elephant? I don't know.
It's like one small step, right? One small
yeah. Sorry to any vegans on the that was gruesome.
Something else that came in the chat that I know you guys addressed on the last session with Travis and the product, but this question is going to be asked a lot today, and so I want to call it out. Is there a Teams integration?
It is coming. I think I see Sunny. The sales team over there at Microsoft has had a year getting Teams spun up because previously we didn't hear much about them, and now we are hearing a lot from customers and prospects about needing Teams. So I'm really glad you share that. We'll make sure the product team hears it again. They're working on it. It's coming. It's going to work very similarly to the Slack integration that you're hearing. So the team is living in Teams. Let's get Ambition in there and help drive that culture.
Go Teams. All right. I'm going to cut the fun off for a second and make us not cut the fun off. This is still fun, just structured fun, where we're going to look at some customer examples. Mark's given so many great detailed examples of what we do, but we like to learn from each other. So I'm going to share my screen again and just walk you through just a few of these, and questions, comments, let us know. This very first thing I have here, I think it helps you talk about something that I appreciate you mentioning in a gamification conversation. And it's that we're all familiar with like what a call blitz is and sort of running those. We're also kind of all familiar at this point with like those more like fantasy style or head-to-head competitions. Those are some really classic ones. But one of my favorite ways to suck all the fun out of it, to use gamification, is change management. And so the sexy thing of change management, but we have seen so more
true,
and more, like over this past year, especially with our enterprise clients, and really people with large, complex sales processes. There were so many things and so many pain points from that. Just simply working from home was one of them, but then just lots of everything's moving so fast. Brands are pivoting, plans are pivoting. So Genworth actually rolled out a new pricing model with a contest. I won't get into exactly how they ran that contest, but would love your insights, Mark, because you did something similar. You rolled out a new sales methodology with a competition. So would love for you to just sort of explain how people can use it that way.
Yeah. So, okay, Ambition customer, think about an initiative that exists at the company right now. For Genworth, it was a new price book that they were driving. For you, it could be a certain product or a certain metric that your CRO talks about all the time. Well, how do you visualize that to the front line in real time at all times? Ambition. So that CRO in this example, in their ivory tower, their initiative doesn't work if the frontline managers and frontline users aren't activated around the initiative, right? So in this example with Genworth rolling out a new pricing model, of course, that's a critically important thing to the business. I would argue a lot of people miss that Ambition could help you do that. So how could it help you do that? You could set up metrics with filters on them above or below the new pricing threshold. You could create triggers that recognize deals sold above the new pricing threshold, or a new product that is sold. So think less about the transactional metrics, which we all kind of fall victim to. Hey, let's celebrate calls or an appointment set, and think, how can I really drive the quality of an initiative via metrics most important? So I'll add one more example there of, let's say you're rolling out a new product. Product X has always been what you sold, and now you're selling product Y in addition. Well, why not create metrics specific to product Y that can be pushed into your Slack channel, that can go display on a TV, that live in a frontline ambition scorecard, and that all rolls up to leadership. So now you have an instant visibility into the performance of product Y. So to round all that out, think less about just the activities and think about the initiatives that leadership are trying to drive. And maybe you aren't on that leadership team yet, but I bet they're interested in an idea to help drive their initiative. So being able to go to them and say, hey, I've got an idea of how we can activate the front line even better. Let's visualize that inside of ambition, and boom, the buy-in around that initiative is now even greater.
100%. Another way I think that we've seen it happen a lot over quarantine times is just simply people using Salesforce in better ways, or using their CRM better, because they maybe were a little bit lax before, but now we have no room. Like, everyone has to follow the processes and procedures so that these goals and activities are visible. So really interesting stuff there. All right. So next example is fun. I love this one. So Off Loans is a customer of ours, and we can kind of react to what they did because I think it's so fun. But this is really an example of why I'm highlighting this one, is that, we talk a lot to sales leaders, and probably most of you on the call are leading sales teams, managing sales teams. But you can also use our tools for really any metric driven team. So Mary, I think in the chat, I saw it out of the corner of my eye, talked about, we're on the marketing team, we drive pipeline, we have a lead queen award that Carolina always wins. No big deal. It's fine. I got a lot of shout outs in this session, so it's fine. I'm busy. No, but you can use contests and competitions for any kind of metric. So you just touched on it in the last one. What I love about what Off Loans is doing here, this is an example. It's a month-long team versus team competition, which is totally that stuff we talked about earlier, where it sort of evens the playing field. It holds everyone equally accountable. And what they were trying to do with this competition, and I think this is something you touch on a lot, Mark, when we talk about this, is that they just focused on one KPI. They weren't trying to drive every single thing. They weren't trying to boil the ocean and eat a whale. They were just trying to lift one metric, which for them was available time.
Yeah.
So it was the time that these reps or these customer advocates are available to take calls and answer tickets. And so, you see this quote here, even though it was only 1 month, it changed the culture of our team. The highlights and sort of the reasons that they stated that it did this were that the teams are just heavily invested in it. So I love this screenshot of, they got to name their teams. They had that ownership that you talked about earlier, Mark, that accountability. So it was like laced up. Like, if you look at those faces, that's not Michael Jordan. That's probably a guy on that team. And then you've got these DJ Khaled fans, heavy use of Slack, those pacing alerts. So this is just reinforcing all the stuff you said. And they got to trash talk so much. So they got really into it. And it was also over a month, the focus of every weekly meeting was like checking in on this competition. So anything to add to this? I mean, I just love highlighting people using pretty much all the best practices you just said. So.
Yeah, I love the Off Loans team. I feel like nationally, maybe a lot of people don't know who they are, but based in Chicago, blowing up. When they first started working with Ambition, I want to say they had, 40 or so people on the platform, and now there's 350 ballpark, and they're growing because they're funding loans. And I think it's somewhere around like the $4,000 threshold is kind of where they play. But anyways, this is not a pure sales environment. When they came to Ambition, they were really looking to create a culture shift around the KPIs most important to the business. And so what worked about this competition is there is beauty in simplicity. One metric for 1 month. Now, what they also did was they visualized that one metric in their scorecard. They also had a goal around that one metric. So it wasn't like it was just living in competitions and you had to be paying attention to the competition for the visibility. It was living in multiple places on the user profile. And this was when we were still in office. It was living on a TV above everyone's heads. So you can still use TVs. Maybe that's reach out to me if you're interested in kind of how that's still working. But remember, it's a URL. It's simple to pull up. But the beauty of this competition is one metric, 1 month. You had everybody on the same page, and they owned their team. So when you create that kind of empowerment and simplicity, most of the time you're going to have really positive results.
And I will say too, when they say changing culture, they don't just mean like, oh, it's fun now. Like they literally have never, whatever the threshold is for this metric, like they've never dipped back below that. Like they did this for a month and it changed the focus of everyone. Like, so I just think that's super, super fun. Oh, go ahead.
I'm going to hop in really quick before we move to the team versus team. So any recommendations on team sizes for the team versus team competition? So I know sometimes we do duos, like just a bunch of duos. Sometimes you split the team in half, but can you talk a little bit about team sizes?
Boy, that's a good question. Okay, I don't have data to answer this, but I'll tell you what I see most often in kind of my gut. The what I've read about Harvard Business Review talking about size of teams, basically how many people should be on a team for a manager. Over the last few years, I think I've seen that number be anywhere between 6 to 8. When I look at an ambition customer in a competition, oftentimes it's about that size. I would say it's somewhere between 5 to 8 people on a team. And there's beauty in the duo setup. There can be value in, just 3 people. But when you have that, I'd say 5 or 6 number on a team, that's when you really know you're going to have each tier of salesperson, right? You're going to have the top performer, you're going to have the middle performer, and the bottom performer. And when you're creating that team atmosphere where the top performer is more invested in the bottom, I think that size works really well. You're probably thinking, well, what would the top line be? Yeah, I don't know. I'd probably say 8 to 10. Anything more than that, it's getting a little muddy and people can hide inside of the competition and performance isn't as visible.
Good answer. Well, we are almost running out of time, but I do not want to stop without highlighting, you say whatever you want to. You have so many thoughts about waste management, but for those of you that don't know, waste management, look outside, you probably will see their logo on the garbage truck going by. Like they literally power waste management for the entire world, it feels like. But they also, if you look them up, have one of the top cultures, business cultures, and then also sales cultures specifically. I mean, it's like in Inc. and Forbes and all these kind of things. Like they really exemplify that. And they are power users on the sales side of contests and competitions. And I feel like they come up every time we talk about a customer that really exemplifies using contests and competitions in a lot of the best practice ways that we just went through. So walk me through kind of what's the magic sauce there? What are they doing?
So there's some similarities to waste management and op loans. I know when I talk to people about waste management's culture, they're like, really? Like waste management has a really progressive sales culture? I'm like, absolutely. I mean, this team is performing really well. They're having a stellar year. But one thing that Doug here that you see and Dave, who he works with, what's making Ambition so successful at waste management is, again, simplicity. So they have visibility, really simple visibility in their scorecards. I want to say they have a max of 4 metrics in their activity scorecard. They also are usually running 2 competitions at a time. So they'll have a short-term competition and they'll have a long-term competition running. Now that competition will be around a metric that exists in the scorecard. The third piece, which we barely hit on, I know we're going to get into more later, but is they coach around that metric. So if you're an Ambition client and you're not using Ambition coaching yet, you should, because this is what's going to create that accountability and development around the initiative that in my CRO ivory tower example earlier, imagine being able to tell them, hey, CRO, your initiative is coached on in the one-on-one every week, and I have it documented, and I also have it documented with attribution around your initiative. So I know if we're performing on the initiative for my team, for my rep, et cetera. So the waste management story, again, is simplicity and its visibility throughout the ambition profile and the ambition dashboard for a frontline seller at Waste Management.
Beautiful. And we have so many chats. We're done. This is it. I loved this session. Mark, you're so smart. So many good things. And Mary, what's going on in our chat room over here?
I think I wanted to shout out Damien had like a fun contest idea that I'm going to talk more about over in the Customer Summit Slack. So I know probably everyone's seeing it over in the chat, but we'll talk more about what makes it so fun in the Slack. And then there was another contest idea around how people use Accolades as part of like this run the weekend contest. So I want to talk more about that in Slack. She said Accolades are kind of like a joker for a fill-in like metric. So tons of really good
love that. Nice.
Yeah, Mark, I'll tag you in and we'll go talk about it because I know we're about at time. So we'll talk about it more over in the Slack. And let me actually share, Jamie, while I get the link, will you remind us what the channel is?
Yes. So I've got it pulled up. So I actually just shared it as well in the Zoom. Or in the Zoom chat. So I've got your back. So go join the Slack. It is CS 2020/gamification. When you land, just find that channel because you'll land in like the general channel. You do not have to be a Slack user. So all my team's fam out there, you can still join this. It's browser based. You may have to click through a few things, but we'll meet you over there. Love those like tantalizing topics, Mary. So I can't wait. I'm very jealous. If you want to stick around with us though, I would love to have you at 2:30, like time has lost all meaning to me. At 2:30, I'm sitting down with Kelly Berg, who is our VP of Customer Success, and we're going to dig into some of the stuff that Mark was just starting to tease at the end. So we're going to talk more about how coaching and gamification create an entire sort of ecosystem of accountability and visibility and transparency in that ivory tower and how you add it all up. So we're also going to touch on Kelly's new to ambition. And so she's got a really compelling insider kind of view that's changed a lot of our perspectives on just how senior leaders need to be using our tools as well. So you do not want to miss her, but I'm going to stop talking and let you guys go to the Slack. And Mark, you have a final.
I just want to thank everybody for being here. You really are like family to us. We're very grateful that you're Ambition customers. Keep sending people our way. Let's keep creating that Peloton atmosphere for your team. And if I'm not already connected to you on LinkedIn, please reach out. But thanks so much for joining.
All right. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.